To his left, we have Shelly Blake-Plock. He is currently building an estuary, which I believe is mobile apps, is that right?
We'll talk about it.
Okay. He also helped build with Andrew Digital Harbor Foundation, was a co-founder there. His interests are in merging digital and physical space, and he focuses on human-centered technology and next iteration of education technology. He also is very interested in data and poetry. To Shelly's left, we have Nicole Tucker-Smith. Nicole Tucker-Smith is a founder and CEO of LessonCast, which provides next-generation teacher preparation and professional development courseware and tools. She consults with schools, districts, and college university teacher preparation programs to design professional learning resources that focus on changing instructional practice and measuring what works to improve student learning. And to the left of Nicole is Domitilla Enders. Domitilla is the CEO of Open Assembly, which is a little more indirectly focused on professional development. She's an architect, educator, and digital learning content expert. Her mission at Open Assembly is to improve the affordability of higher education by enhancing the quality, discoverability, and relevance of open educational resources. Something we talked about quite a bit in the last panel is that content seems to be going free. It's the services around that seems to be the value add. And she facilitates their adoption by instructors and students in community and public colleges. So a quick round of applause for our professional development panel. Okay, so I put quite a few questions together for this crew. I don't know that we'll get them all, but we will try. So, Jason, first for you, do you think the professional development climate has changed over the years, and if so, how much?
I think with the real focus on evaluation becoming one of the two main issues of reform right now, a lot of people are thinking about it in the right way, some aren't, but a lot of people are thinking about it in a way that you can use evaluation and coaching as a professional development tool. So professional development, like you mentioned, was traditionally someone came in, the group of teachers was in the cafeteria on an in-service day, and they preached their particular coaching methodologies. Never to come back, never to check up, and just disseminate and leave for a very expensive sum. And you're starting to see a transition to coaching as professional development. So it's job embedded, it's frequent, it's from the people within their building. So if I have a question on something that I'm learning, I can go back to that teacher in my building or go back to my instructional support leader. I think there's a real focus on that, which is great to see.
So definitely that mentorship is really important, not just here you go, I'm out of here sort of approach. We've also noticed a change in content too with professional development. Nicole, I know your company is really focused around the use of online video. How has online video facilitated professional development?
Well, traditionally, the use of online video for professional development, in the beginning, it just replicated the traditional model that Jason referred to, where somebody came and talked for an hour in the cafeteria, where traditionally online video was 60-minute online video, the same person doing that thing. At LessonCast, we're more interested in a 3-minute video format where we focus on a specific instructional practice and use that as a way to focus teacher collaboration and professional development so that new ideas are implemented the very next day. So I think there's a shift from simply replicating what existed before, the long lecture format, to let's condense our video time so that we're spending more time collaborating and planning. And at LessonCast, we're also really interested in helping teachers not just consume online video, but become the producers so that they're sharing their expertise and able to build on each other's ideas. So I think it's a work in progress.
Great. Next is Shelly, a question for you. You run a B2B company working with professional development companies. What specifically do you do for them? I remember reading some mention of mobile and some other interactive experiences, but what do you specifically do for those companies?
Well, first of all, I think that professional development itself shouldn't be really centered around getting teachers to do it right. Professional development should be around sort of getting teachers to do everything wrong. Because by and large, one of the biggest problems regarding education isn't the student test scores. It's not whether or not teachers managed to keep their class under control. It's not about whether kids did their homework. It's about the infrastructure of culture. The biggest problem facing education today is that of distribution. What's happened is that the models, the dominant models of distribution that exist in our age have shifted over the last 15 years. And yet, not just the content, because personally, our company doesn't do content. There are other people who do that, do an awesome job of it. Our company is interested in reimagining what the distribution of knowledge is all about. Because the way that knowledge itself, the way that learning is distributed, fundamentally hasn't changed all that much in the past 120 years. When Adam was up here talking about sort of what that looks like in terms of coding and the ability to sort of compress an entry-level Ruby on Rails experience into a 12-week program, I'm amazed that that surprises anybody. The internet itself and the systems of distribution on the internet, whether you're talking about entertainment, whether you're talking about media, has become modular, it's become on demand, it's become customizable, and it's become cheap. Yet the education distribution system of a teacher who goes through a certain certification process, who then teaches in a school that is accredited in a certain way, and has certain curricula designed by school boards of education, has certain demands around all kinds of different laws related to socioeconomics and local politics. That's sort of just a big screwed up system. And no ed tech is going to fix that, so long as the system itself, the distribution system of knowledge, doesn't change. So we really want not professional development, we want teachers themselves to develop the profession. I don't want to disrupt education. I want to completely overhaul what the word means. And I want to let teachers and educators and whoever wants to create the content to do that have the power to do that. That's what we do.
All right, so we'll have to get into some specifics for Shelly then to see, to really hear about the disruption. Could you give us one specific of how you think you actively want to disrupt what's going on in education?
Quick one. There are some awesome content sources out there, both sort of teacher-created content, places like Teachers Pay Teachers, Better Lesson, places that are more the OER style, like Curriki, right up to something like the Library of Congress, Teaching with Primary Sources system. But they fall into a fundamental problem that every coder identifies immediately, and that is that they work in static systems. And by taking what we've learned from versionable coding and social repositories and applying it to systems of everything from curriculum and lesson planning, right across to the really hard problems like distribution of finances, matters of legal code and how it applies to families and schools, we have a much more complex, much more dynamic system. That's sort of the beginning of what we want to build.
So that's actually a really good introduction to Domitilla's first question. You had mentioned OER, which is Open Educational Resources, which seem to be kind of some of the themes that we're pulling back here, that content eventually might be free and it's the services around those. Domitilla, I let the cat out of that. You specifically are a hosting platform for open source content. Where do you see that being leveraged the most, and where can it be leveraged more?
You're right in a way that we are a hosting platform, but I think the purpose of the hosting is to enable better teaching and better learning. So we really think of ourselves as customizing the teaching or enabling the customization of teaching and the personalization of learning, but by providing tools. And the kinds of tools that we provide are a very easy way for an instructor to assemble a curriculum, for instance, using open resources or even proprietary resources. There's a world of resources out there, but how do I hang on to them other than through bookmarks and all that? So you can build your own private collections of libraries, and then the student really needs a personal learning environment that they can shape themselves. So OERs are definitely rising in quality and the fastest growing type of learning content. And what's really important about open resources is not that they're free online, in my opinion, it's that they're shareable. And they're shareable because they're copyleft versus copyright. Copyright does not permit distribution or remixing of content, even when it's free. But copyleft does, and by copyleft, that's a term, of course, that's taken from software development, but in the OER world, we call it a Creative Commons license. I'm sure you've all seen it. And the power of that is that you can develop a resource that thousands of educators or students have actually improved and worked on, instead of one subject matter expert. And I believe that that is going to lead to to really raising the bar on teaching and learning.
So something that everybody touched on a little bit is that professional development, I started with, it used to be in-service days, you would get lectured to. Now there seems to be this movement toward more peer-to-peer professional development. So can any of you speak to how peer-to-peer is going to help revolutionize professional development over the traditional models we used to have?
One thing that I'm a big fan of is education is inherently local. New York City is very different than the Midwest. So for the same traditional professional development providers to be servicing both regions, I just don't think it's fair to teachers in the Bronx or to the teachers in the Midwest who are dealing with different populations, different demographics, different problems. And so I think treating it as a local issue and then really bringing into what Shelly was talking about with the distribution of great content and great ideas, and allowing people to implement that in their own ways. And you have local resources that you can pull from who are dealing with these same exact kids in the same buildings from the same families. That's, I think, a real power. And it's not as sexy because it's not like a cool technology that's backing all of those things. But I think it's the most powerful.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think we need to expand our definition of professional learning and professional development. And so when I think about my experience as a teacher early on, if I had a question or was stuck in some way, I went to the teacher down the hall and I asked them for help. And they gave me an idea, and they gave me the resources that they used to implement that idea. And now, many years later, then when I was an experienced teacher and then an administrator, I provided that same service for the teachers as well. So it was that peer-to-peer, but then now that we have Twitter and blogs, it's exponential, and all of that is professional learning. It's not just having an expert and share. And I think the more the schools and communities embrace that idea of peer-to-peer beyond just the walls, then you have a greater level of collaboration globally.
And did you find that teachers back when you walked down the hall and asked them questions that they were actually helpful?
In my schools where I worked, they were helpful in that, I've always worked in urban education, and we're going to sink or swim together, and we all help one another, and my kids were their kids, and if things did not go well in my classroom, it affected somebody else's classroom. And so we all really worked together. And then as an administrator, I was appointed to a school that was zero-based, meaning everybody had to reapply for their job because the previous years before that, the test scores had been so bad. And so by the time we hired all the new staff, we had about 100 faculty members, half of us are new and half of them were new to teaching. We realized we all needed to do this together because otherwise in 2 years, we'd all be reapplying for our jobs again. And so I didn't have a problem in my experiences with sharing and building that kind of culture.
Yeah, when I taught, I actually found that other teachers weren't helpful. It seemed that every teacher was an island. So you were in your classroom, you were in charge of your classroom, and it was sink or swim, and you're on your own. What are some of the online tools that are or what are the ways that teachers can access online tools instead of being an island? How can they get involved in other communities, whereas they might have blinders on and they might not even know those communities are out there. And that's for anybody.
We're actually just in the midst of opening the beta of a new mobile product called Sanderling, which is designed sort of to deal with that very problem of how you create communities where teachers both have accesses to resources and pedagogical methods that work and are effective, but where they're the ones who are really creating the content on the network and creating connections within the network to allow much more sort of professional clout coming directly from the teaching profession itself. I like to think that, you know, if I were making a camera, I would really like to make the greatest camera in the world and then give it to somebody who's a filmmaker, and they go out and make something that none of us could imagine, something just strikingly beautiful. We don't really think about teachers like that, yet the very best teachers have always been content creators. The very best teachers have always been artists. What we need to do is give them absolutely cutting-edge, top-notch tools that don't tell them what to do, but allow them to really tap into networks where they can share and where they can create together, use those skills that great teachers have always had. Yet, prior, teaching has been a place with a lot of trepidation and silos and worry.
So actually, Domitilla, that's for you. Next, off of what Shelly said, Shelly really talked about the online communities and getting teachers engaged in those communities, really important in the discovery of them. Once they're engaged, now there's this feedback loop. After you've shared your content, can you speak to how important that feedback is now from your content that you might not have had that before?
We're finding that so far, one of the most powerful things that a teacher can do for themselves as well as for another teacher is to pass on directly their curriculum and their actual course. So the curriculum is the spine and direction of the course, and the course is the live and total interaction in time that took place between teachers and students, etc. So what we are going to be allowing is for teachers to pass that on, not just their curriculum, but the entire course experience to another teacher. Now that sounds a little overwhelming, but we think that the most valuable thing you can do is precisely that, because think how far the next teacher is going to go with that information and with a glimpse into another teacher's experience. So it's a different aspect of professional development, if it is at all, which is empowering teachers to learn from one another based on their actual classroom experience.
And how do they share that experience?
How they share it is they can share their curricula, and then what we're going to do is make available all the interactions that happen around that curriculum by the students and between the students, with some many filters that allow you to look at it in a lot of different ways, and to provide them with course analytics also so that they can understand it, and then they can pass them on to the next teacher.
So is it essentially going to boil down to the course analytics is the amount of interactivity, the rating that another teacher gave it, the amount of comments and feedback that was added to the lesson? How are you going to be able to qualify that?
All of that, and then the next teacher gets to decide what's important to him or her. So you can filter it based on what you think are the important things.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point. One thing I never understood is why a teacher teaches the same lesson twice. It always blew my mind that if you taught it the previous year, why not record it, make that homework, and then the next year, everybody watches that for homework and then expands upon that concept. Can you speak to how content now can evolve over time, as opposed to being the same lesson every year?
Well, I mean, I don't know many teachers who teach the same lesson every year, just the ones I work with, because the students are different every year. You're not teaching.
Have you taught math before?
No, I taught language arts. But the students are still different, I would imagine, in a math class. students, and you know, you're getting different students and they're different places, and you can tell when people have been teaching the same way, regardless of who the students are, but I don't think that's teaching, I think that's talking. So if you're really teaching, you're understanding where the students are and you're meeting them where they are and you're adjusting accordingly. I think the same way, if we're thinking about professional development and professional learning, we also need to have the content evolve because teachers are changing, students are changing, and I found that, you know, we developed LessonCast after trying to have professional development that was customizable and could evolve with where we were as a learning community. And I think it's important to hear the feedback from the people who are participating, because we would develop a LessonCast and a teacher would say, you know, I have a question about this, I didn't understand that, and we built a tool, a digital tool, where you could change parts of it very easily because we knew we needed to constantly iterate and evolve because we didn't have time to play. We didn't have time to wait. If we're going to fail, we needed to fail fast. And I think that the same needs to be applied on a broader scale.
So it seems that heuristically we're getting a lot more open content, a lot more sharing and distribution of content, a lot more feedback of that content across the board. But then it also sounds like there's specific areas that are really having a lot of resurgence in professional development. And Jason, you had mentioned on the phone that New Orleans experienced this, and we didn't get too in depth with it. But why did New Orleans specifically have a resurgence of professional development?
Well, first of all, I spent a week there, so I have a very, very small glimpse into what they're doing. And Nicole, weren't you down? I believe you were down there.
No, but my husband's supposed to be going next or 2 weeks from now, so I'll be able to tell you about it.
I mean, New Orleans is a very unique space. I mean, it's 90% charter. That's what emerged after Hurricane Katrina. It was headed there actually beforehand. Traditionally, charters, I think, focus more on professional development and coaching because they have the capacity to. They have smaller schools. The teacher to admin ratio is lower. So I just was hearing stories of teachers receiving feedback on a daily basis in some cases, or every other day, which is talking about what we used to see, one observation per year for 45 minutes. It's just the complete opposite. So that's a big focus. There's also a teacher that I met down there that just I believe she's taking a sabbatical, and she's starting something called Teacher Gym, which is a place where teachers can go to work on teacher moves at the Teacher Gym. So kind of a clever name. And it's the whole idea of teachers teaching each other, certain techniques that they can manipulate and take to their classrooms. And as you guys were talking, the thing that was jumping out at me is it should be like a buffet, or go to the grocery store is a better kind of analogy, where I go and I get my produce, I get all the basic stock and supplies, and then I manipulate it and I cook it into the meal that my family will enjoy, because you have a set of students that are unique to you, on that given day, and that's the biggest power of having that distributed content, is that you can take the baseline material or the baseline techniques of classroom management, what have you, and manipulate them to your classroom. So I think that's a big skill, and that also comes along with professionalizing teaching and treating it as a true profession to work on those skills. And I think the tide is completely moving towards that.
So was there a deliberate focus on changing professional development in New Orleans area, or did, because of the disruption of the hurricane, it just evolved that way?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's easy to say. I think that they just had an opportunity to completely change and to start fresh. But you see it in certain schools. I mean, when Eric was talking this morning, he's doing very unique things, and he's in a high school in a public district. So I think it just takes a culture, and that's what Shelly was hitting on. It just takes a culture that says, I'm going to institute this, I'm going to change the siloed classroom approach, open the classroom doors, and listen to what my peers are saying as well. I think there's always talk about seniority and tenure and all those things, and what gets lost is that the people that have been in the profession for 30 years know a ton, and they are some of the best teachers, or have been some of the best teachers. And then the people entering the profession have their own set of experiences as being a different generation. And there's a lot of I think, peer-to-peer collaboration that can happen as a result. And people realize that, hey, that 23-year-old person who just got out of college that I'm not a big fan of actually has a lot to teach me, and I have a lot to teach them, and recognizing that is a cultural shift.
And another disruption that we had in recent years, aside from the Hurricane New Orleans, was the recession. Shelly, you had mentioned that you thought the recession had a negative impact on professional development. Why is that?
Well, in many schools, the reality is that professional development is the first thing to go. That's the first thing on the line item that you get rid of. You tell teachers to go out there and get what they need to stay certified, but the money's not there in the school. So that's part of it. That brings up the money issue. I haven't heard too much talk today about money. When people think about professional development, if they think about it at all, it's a very niche thing, this very esoteric thing within the teaching profession, within the education industry. There are 4 million K-12 teachers in this country. Add in pre-K through college, you're talking about around 7 million people in the United States. The direct costs in the United States around professional development are estimated at upwards of $16 billion. The indirect cost in the time and everything else that goes into actually delivering services has been argued over $20 billion. This is just the United States. And the interesting thing about that is that the United States actually per teacher puts in less of a percentage of the overall expenditure than any country that's beating the United States on any of the international testing into professional development. Meaning that the global market for professional development is a massively huge market. And someone is going to make a lot of money off of that.
People already are.
And I think that something that the folks up here on the panel have in common is that it's really important that we think this through, because professional development affects teachers and the way that teachers deliver curriculum. The way that teachers deliver curriculum has a direct effect on the way that students achieve. That is documented fact. The future of any of our students is directly tied to what kind of professional development the teachers have. Meaning that the future of everything that all of those people come through school have, the impact that they have on the economy, goes right back to the preparation of that teacher. That affects every single industry globally. Now, who do you want getting those teachers organized? Who do you want preparing those teachers? Do you want big organizations that stand to make a ton of money off of it? Do you want big unions who stand to make a ton of money in a different way? Do you want administrators handing down, once again, another generation of rules and regulations for the teachers? Do we want school boards, most of whom are comprised of people whose only idea of what a teacher is comes from the point of view of being a child of one of their classes, dictating what happens and what that looks like, and by de facto dictating what the future of the country looks like. And I think that everyone up here on the panel, though we come at it from a different angle, have an agreement that teachers actually matter. And we need to let them have control and say into their profession.
So there's obviously the professional development, which leads to the quality and level of instruction. You had also mentioned there's a disconnect between the instruction and then how we actually evaluate the students. So if the instruction model and the evaluation are at odds with each other, what do we need to do to change that?
Blow it all up.
So start over. So bring a hurricane on and be able to start from scratch.
It's a funny thing. I think that there is a lot of opportunity for massive, massive change related to education. And I think that by the same token, frankly, a lot of the people who are creating the technologies to make that massive change happen don't necessarily want that kind of massive change happening in their own kids' schools. There aren't many education reformers who put their kids into inner city public schools. Working with students and teachers in those schools, you see different realities. And the realities that are social, the realities that are political, And the reality is people don't like to talk about it. So when I say blow it all up, part of me, yeah, blow it all up. But the other part of me says, no, that's absolutely fundamentally ridiculous. It's not an easy question that comes out of a panel discussion in front of an audience full of people. It's something that only happens from teachers and people on the ground working to figure out how to do it, to make it happen. The kind of change that we've seen in Baltimore hasn't happened because someone made a decision at the top. It happened because teachers collaborated, coordinated together to change things in their schools. Parents said enough. And ultimately the students themselves said, my generation deserves better than this. So, blow it up.
So that builds something else, that the shift in professional development, really a bigger shift in why EdTech is now viable and resurging, is because the decision no longer comes all the way at the top and floats down. It's now the teachers actually have a place to go, and if you want to see firsthand, just go on Twitter and watch these different chats that occur between teachers and the professional development they're getting from the conversations they're having. Granted, some are a bit shallow, and they take over to blogs to actually build depth on it. But teachers can solicit that feedback, or they can give help to others through that. They can also choose their own professional development content. They can organize themselves into PLNs and PLCs and all of these other acronyms where teachers get together and help each other, which is big. And on the bigger scale, education can change because more of it's happening at the lower levels. Products are being built for the people that are being used, rather than for the person that's buying them. And I think the same is happening with PD. And just one other thing around PD and money, I mean, $1 billion is spent in New York City every year on PD. How much of that is on smartboard PD? It's probably a pretty big percentage. And that's a great example of someone comes in and delivers some PD for a lot of money. Where's the ROI on all of that money that's being spent? And
I just want to add, so when and if we blow everything up, we need to think about what we're replacing it with. And it frustrates me when I see technology as an opportunity to simply replicate what we're already doing and just do it faster or scale it. And a good example of that would be assessment. I don't understand, if assessment's going to be adaptive and it can be online, then why does every student still have to take it all at the same time? And I'm invested in this as a parent, so why does my child who may already be reading at a certain level have to wait 3 years to take the 3rd grade reading assessment? And why does somebody who may be behind have to take it when they're not ready? If we have this opportunity with technology, then let's use it to think about some things differently. And the same thing goes with professional development. Why reinvent the wheel and just make it go faster? Let's do something differently and smarter in a way that actually has a meaningful impact. Like smartboards, for example, are a big craze, but if you're just replicating it as a fancier blackboard, is it really making a difference? Is it really making a difference? If it's still a teacher doing everything at the board, is it still having an impact on student learning? I think there are better ways to use smartboards, so I don't want to offend anybody who represents a smartboard company. But we just need to think about not replicating what we already have, but designing the future in mind.
I just want to dovetail on that, and I don't want to throw out a topic that might be out of left field, but that's exactly the argument that many of us would make about MOOCs. I know you guys all know what that means, which is it's still the stage on the stage. So where's the innovation? And I think that professional development or communities, as in our case, communities of instructors that can share their experience with one another are going to start to bring about a completely different, and are starting to bring about a completely different type of instructional innovation. It's truly from the ground up.
So changing, we just have a few minutes left before QA here. Changing topics just very quickly. We've obviously talked about sharing is really key. The feedback loop, not being in the silo for teachers. Another big thing for professional development is the other half of it, the observations of teachers. And we talked about how professional development leads to, should directly lead to outcomes with the students. I started things off saying that, my review was 2 pages on why I need to be wearing a suit and a tie every day. How has the observation changed, or how does the observation need to change for teachers?
The dominant technologies that are currently used in professional development are all based around observation. In terms of the stuff that schools actually pay money on, they're paying money on technologies that basically let administrators walk into a classroom once a year, use a checklist on their iPad, and then direct teachers, because they see the answers that came in through the checklist, to go watch videos online that magically make you a better teacher. That's currently what we spend money on. The Department of Education itself, down in DC, pumps $1 billion into LEAs across the country, and there is absolutely zero way of measuring the effectiveness of any of that PD money at all. So I sort of advocate for flipping. We all know the flipping the classroom model, right? If it's good for the students, it's good for the teachers too, right? Let the teachers be the one who document their own data on an ongoing basis, constantly through the year, ongoing formative development. This is all the education school stuff that is actually borne out to be powerful in terms of developing blended learning practice. Let that happen and then, instead of having, every teacher in this room knows that your observations are a dog and pony show. And you get ready for them when your administrator shows up and you do your thing, and you get your checklist, or you get marked off, or whatever. And it's a bunch of crap. We all know that. Why not use the technology that mobile provides to actually let teachers document what they actually do, because no one knows what teachers actually do. And then the administrator is getting a constant source, a stream of visualized data that can make informed decisions about the money, the practice, the pedagogy that's actually producing or not producing results in the school. Flip the PD.
I've got another follow-up on that, if I may, which is on our platform, what we're thinking about, we'll see how our next generation of users think about it, but we want to implement a rubric, actually, that's based on research that has been already conducted in the college market as to what constitutes effective online or blended learning. And so we want to give teachers the actual rubric to evaluate themselves. And that's along the lines of what you're talking about. But the rubric, what's nice about that is that you have some sort of a research-based approach to it, so that you don't have any subjective standards.
Can I just add something too? So as an administrator, I have to admit my favorite part of my job is doing observations, and it's all about the culture of the school. In my school, the teachers ask me, I'm trying something new, can you come and see how it goes? Can you give me feedback? And they would invite each other. It depends on the culture of the environment. And as an observer, when I would go in, my eye didn't follow the teacher. I watched the students. And we're stuck in this mind that observation is all about watching the teacher and following what the teacher's doing. I watched the students to see how they responded and what they knew. And then after the observation, it was a conversation with the teacher. How do you think that went? I noticed this student responded this way. And so I still think that we can't only go by one version of what we think an observation is and what it should be. And I get worried when we replace it all with data points and we forget about the children who are in the room.
So this is stuff that Teach Boost, talked about Teach Boost and all, but this is what we help facilitate. The good news is that from the principals I talk to on a daily basis, the good ones at least, I mean there's the same spectrum of bad to good on instructional leaders as everything else in the world. Good principals will not do what Shelly was talking about because they're there to support their teachers. They're there to go in on a frequent basis, and here's how you tell. When a principal goes into the room, like if they take me into a classroom, and the kids don't even skip a beat, you know they're in the classroom all the time and they're supporting their teachers. Hopefully it's quality feedback, just being there doesn't create, great instruction, but it helps supports it, it helps show they care. And part of it is a cultural shift. That's one of the good things out of some of the evaluation things that are coming in certain places is that it makes it more frequent. It's being in the classroom at least 6 times a year for a teacher. Which still I don't think is enough, but at least puts the accountability on the administrator to be in the classroom supporting your teachers. And it shouldn't be about a checklist. The checklist is terrible. That whenever I see a checklist, it makes me cringe, because you're going in there to see what's happening in that particular day. The teacher has prepared a lesson for that group of students, for that content, and you're in there to support the things that happen against that lesson. Not see, okay, yes, you asked a question, you waited 5 seconds, check. It's about thinking about the professional standards after the fact, but being in the moment and being supportive of what's happening then. Because there is, research-based rubrics for defining what does great teaching look like. There's a bunch of them there. They're all really the same. The state puts them out, consultants put them out, and there is some helpful content there on how to structure your teaching in some ways. But the checklist is ludicrous.
But what I will add, what I do want to say though, is at the schools that I work with, we don't have checklists, but we collaboratively develop look fors. Like we say, like, what do we want our classrooms to look like? And we talk about that, and we generate those look fors for ourselves. So it's not a checklist, but we have an agreement on, this is how we want to personalize learning for our students. This is how we want them to be engaged. This is how we want to provide multiple opportunities for them to access content however it best reaches them. And I think it's worth having those conversations and generating those look fors as a community, not having a checklist that's adopted from somewhere else that doesn't necessarily fit your instructional philosophy. But that is part of professional development.
Yes, but keep in mind, it's a little bit different with online learning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubrics, which are developed by instructors,
Right,
by the way, are really needed.
One thing that just real quick on Nicole's point is that the schools that have developed their own system, taken someone else's work and modified it for their culture, are the ones who implement the best coaching and the best support for their teachers. Coming up with those look fors, making it relevant. It's personalizing learning for their teachers. And so it sounds like you have that great culture.
So a last comment from each of you before we go to QA and wrap this up here. Let's fast forward 20 years, or 30 years, doesn't matter, and give us one vision of what professional development looks like 20, 30 years from now. One vision. This is a vision I see for professional development. I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. One vision.
Everyone thinks of themselves as a learner and as a teacher.
So students and teachers are both
Everyone.
learners and teachers.
Yes.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Excellent. Domitilla, one vision.
The Department of Professional Development has been eliminated.
Okay, excellent. Jason?
I'm very, very bad at speculating. And I'll always get myself in trouble. So I'm in some ways going to cheat. And what Nicole said, I think, was perfect. It's knowledge has been really made a commodity. It's what you do with, or the information has been made a commodity. So you need to package that up in interesting ways and learn how to learn as fast as possible, and also teach that content to others in really engaging ways.
And Shelly, one vision from the future for professional development.
My hope is that broadly speaking, education and learning are seen as an art, and we don't lose a lot of the beauty and nuance and sophistication to the demons of efficiency.
Sorry, that was my PS to the department. I meant the Department of Professional Development, not professional development.
The department itself. All right, excellent. We got about 3-4 minutes here. Is there any questions for our professional development panel? Yes.
Mine's more of a comment, really. I really liked your emphasis on collaboration and teachers mentoring other teachers. I do professional development for faculty at the City University of New York, and it's all online, it's all asynchronous. And what the teachers seem to enjoy most about it is talking
collaboration is then it leads to iteration. So there's an idea and someone says, oh, and I've used that idea and integrated this technology tool with it. And so you're continually building a collective repository of ideas.
Excellent. Is there any other questions for the panel? Okay. And thanks again.